Hello everyone, and welcome back to the extra videos for Let's Play the Journeyman Project 2 Buried in Time. Today we're looking at the Louvre and its auction. It made money!
Orylen will return after word from our sponsor.
Cheese girl!
I do not like you, Cheese Girl commercial. Just don't.
In a last-ditch effort to stay afloat, the Louvre Art Museum held an auction of unprecedented scale yesterday. The museum was forced to sell off many of its older collections to pay off creditors and to raise funds desperately needed for renovations to the facility. In a fervent display of support, the art community rallied around the historic landmark, showing that the museum itself is every bit as valuable an artifact as any of the works of art it contains. The auction was an astounding success, raising 138.5 billion credits, easily surpassing the 100 billion credit goal. This windfall was due in large part to one generous bidder who preferred to remain unidentified. Martin Walker is standing by with a live report from the Louvre.
Thanks, Mark. I'm standing inside the historic Louvre Museum in Paris. Behind me sits one of the few pieces to survive yesterday's extensive art auction. Items up for auction included artifacts and works of art from many of the Louvre's oldest collections, including the Da Vinci exhibit, the ancient Egyptian, and Toltec Mayan exhibits. 4 particular items were snapped up by a generous bidder who paid much more than the asking price. The bidder's identity is unknown, but it is assumed to be an art enthusiast who didn't want to see the Louvre shut down. There are rumors, however, that the buyer may actually have been acting on behalf of another race in the symbiotry, which, according to the Earth History Preservation Act of 2322, would be illegal. We're told an investigation may follow. Museum sources that I spoke to speculated that the revenue from the auction will be enough to keep the Louvre in operation for at least the next 5 years. However, they warned me that the price of admission may go up in order to help cover operating costs, a small price to pay for such a wealth of human history and culture.
So this news story is actually going back to the items, going back to pieces of art. So let's go and look at what actually has been going on in the Louvre.
The Louvre's financial difficulties arose from a combination of rising maintenance costs, overspending, and lower than normal attendance. Several costly acquisitions in recent years sunk the museum into spiraling debt. When repairs to the facilities became unavoidable and visitor attendance fell, it became clear that a major influx of cash was needed to cure the museum's ills. In June, the decision was made to auction off several of its older exhibits. That decision paid off well yesterday.
And then we can look at the Louvre! Great! So if you didn't know anything about the Louvre, here is a little quick blurb about what's going on. Now this actually just goes back to that information, and I think this just goes back to this. Yes, it does!
The Louvre's financial difficulties...
I don't want to hear you anymore. So let's talk about this high bidder. It's certainly interesting.
The 4 items that the unidentified bidder purchased included the Toltec Mayan ceremonial coffer, King Richard the Lionheart's sword from the Crusades, Leonardo da Vinci's Codex Atlanticus, and an interactive sculpture entitled Self-Awareness, credited to Kenneth Farnstein. Attendees of the auction said the buyer did not try to purchase any other items, but immediately made an excessive bid on these 4 artifacts as soon as the bidding opened. Experts estimated that the unidentified man paid at least 7 billion credits more than the true value of the pieces, but none could say why he was so interested in 4 such disparate artifacts. They eventually conceded that it may have simply been their rich histories that intrigued him. The 4 items that the unidentified
Alright, so nothing but
four items that the
I think all of this information is pretty much the same.
The 4 items that the
So let's look at the items in particular. So we got a Mayan coffer, Richard I sword, Codex Atlanticus, and self-awareness set sculpture. If you could put 2 and 2 together, all of those pieces come from the 4 locations that we're going to. So yeah, the Mayan coffer is definitely an intricate piece. It's a puzzle box that opens up if you have the right code. If you don't have the right code, however, you die. And how you die is because you have to... The way you have to hold it in order to move the pieces is to have to hold the ends. And if you get it wrong, there's poison needles inside the box. So you'll get stabbed through your hand and poison and you'll die. So it's wonderful. I think this blurb even says that nobody really knows what's inside. Yeah, few clues about the contents. Now there is some new Mayan information that we can get out of here, including the High Priest's grave. And then also some actual information on El Castillo. And of course, Kukulkan. Again, we'll be looking more at these when we actually go to Chichen Itza. And of course, yeah, this is where I actually got confused. Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl both lead to Kukulkan, but that's only because they're one and the same. It's another one of those adopted names business like the Greeks and Romans have. The Aztecs and Mayans also adopted from each other. Mainly the Mayans adopted from the Aztecs, I mean, that one direction. Now, if you ever wanted to learn more about the Mayan afterlife, here's some information here about the Masters of the Night, and also the Underworld. The Mayan underworld is a very bleak place. The afterlife in particular is bleak as well. And also Mictlan, the Dead Land. Mayans were not happy. So there's the coffer. Next up is his Richard I's sword. A wonderful sword with a 4-carat diamond on the hilt. Now, I'm not entirely sure that Richard I's sword has ever been found, like, in reality ways, because this game also says that it hasn't been discovered. It was rediscovered in 2015. So, yeah, I need to brush up on my history, God. Not a lot of new information on Richard. But then we get more information on Leonardo da Vinci, including the Codex Atlanticus, which, if you don't know a lot about Da Vinci, the Codex Atlanticus was his book of flight. It contained a lot of sketches and information that built his fabled flying machine, if you will. And finally, the dump that the studio really wanted to do, self-awareness. Because, of course, this is Kenneth Forenstein. Let's put tons of information because we can. It's one of a series. I believe there is a series of 4 sculptures. Want to say so. But we'll be looking at that in more detail about what the actual sculpture is. And what it actually does, because it just looks like a green sphere, of course. it's certainly an interesting piece, especially when they kind of, the reviews, I guess, look into more that Farnstein didn't actually make this. Something else did. I wonder what. I don't think there's even any new information in here. Other than, oh yeah, you have to look at Amarax. The Lazy Jane video log! Gives us a wonderful picture of where we're gonna go. Yeah, 4 remarkable interactive sculptures and also an advanced biocomputer. Those were the only things. And the Lazy Jane is a space sweeper. Alrighty then. So I believe that's all that can be seen with the information about the Louvre. So that's it for the Louvre, and we get more information on some very specific artifacts. So let's finish off this video by looking at the shortest story of them all, the Sinclair incident 10 years later.
The events surrounding the arrest of Agent 5 bring back, for most, memories of the Elliot Sinclair incident. That historic day 10 years ago could have turned out much differently if it weren't for Agent 5 of the Temporal Protectorate. After building the first ever functional time machine, only to have the government shelve the project because it was considered too dangerous, Sinclair decided to sidestep the politicians and build his own temporal transporter. Years later, when the Sorolans made contact with Earth to offer us a place in the symbiotry of peaceful beings, the xenophobic scientist suddenly found himself with a new purpose. Fearing an alien invasion, he tried to convince the public that the Sorolans were not what they appeared to be. But this endeavor met with little success. Frustrated, exasperated, and on the verge of insanity, Sinclair formulated a plan to make Earth a more difficult target for the Sorolans. On the day of the Sorolan ambassador's arrival, he sent each of his 3 robot minions back in time to change the course of history. The first he sent to create a nuclear scare that would prevent world unification and prolong the Cold War. The second was to destroy the Morimoto Mars colony and make it look like the work of an alien race. And the third Sinclair sent to kill Dr. Enrique Castillo, the individual who was most influential in convincing humanity of the benefits of joining the symbiotry. His backup plan, should his robots have failed, was to assassinate the Sorolan delegate. It was our good fortune that Agent 5 was on duty at the Temporal Security Annex that day. He detected the temporal distortions, stopped each of the androids, and then apprehended Sinclair himself. That fateful morning made a hero of Agent 5 and spawned the blockbuster holoflick, The Journeyman Project. Elliot Sinclair was put on trial and found guilty of all charges. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on Vega Thalon and hasn't been heard from since.
Mark Johnson, where'd you go? Hello? Oh, he disappeared. Oh well. And that is it. We're done with all the stories. Oh god, there's so much information there. Did you take it all in? Probably not. But that's okay, not a lot of it is actually very important anyway. So with that, we can get up, get out of here, and move on to what is more important than sitting around and doing nothing. Actually going to the time zones and seeing what's going on. So with all that, now we continue on, and if you're watching these in order, you're probably going to be watching the second episode next. I'll meet you there when we go to the Farnstein lab and see what's going on there. See you next time, everyone.